Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to Pits To Podium. This is myself, Soumil Arora here. And a very warm welcome to all of our viewers on the Inside Line Formula One podcast too. What a weekend. What a fantastic British GP weekend this was. And firstly, Kunal, we got our predictions right. We said in our Pits To Podium pre-race show for the Silverstone GP that George Russell would get a good lap, he would get a good race, and he raced P12 for him.
Absolutely. I think his lap was brilliant in qualifying, and that's one extra reason for me to tune into qualifying. But we had one more prediction right. We said Lewis Hamilton will be absolutely dominant. And, he was dominant on 3 as well as on 4 wheels when it came to his home race.
Exactly. Mercedes proving yet again that they're so dominant that they can not only win on 4 wheels, but this time also on 3. But so much happening in the British GP, Kunal. So much to watch out for. But before we get to all of that, folks, if you're just tuning in on YouTube, please don't forget to watch our Working in F1 playlist as well, because we've got quite a few top analysts in the world of Formula One. We've got Mark Sutton, a legendary photographer. We have got William Budisi, the head of communications for Alfa Romeo Formula One. And we've got Michael Italiano, who is the fitness trainer of Daniel Ricciardo. The other side, we've got Alex Lynn, the Mahindra Racing Formula E driver, on the show as well. So there's quite a bit going on Pits To Podium. But let's get down to the British GP, Kunal. First half, a bit of a snooze-a-thon. But in the end, Lewis Hamilton did, a Lightning McQueen pretty much. Is that your Pits To Podium moment, the whole tires blowing out kind of thing?
Absolutely. I think for Lewis, it was a Pits To Podium moment. For Pirelli, it was the other way around. It was a podium to pits moment. And, I would say it was like the first 13 laps of the British Grand Prix and maybe the last 8 or 9 odd laps of the British Grand Prix when things suddenly went alive. In the middle, everyone was just waiting for things to happen. And, the typical metrics that we discussed in our pre-race video, how far ahead will, Mercedes finish of their rivals, how far behind Ferrari will be, and so on. And, we were calculating those metrics till, of course, Valtteri Bottas was the first victim of those tire blowouts that we saw, followed by Carlos Sainz Jr. and then Lewis Hamilton as well.
Yeah, exactly. Quite a lot of drama happening at Silverstone. Again, shades of 2013. We'll speak about Mercedes' dominance only briefly because there's not much to speak about, but we'll talk about that later on. But the tires, Kunal. Lots of people came on social media saying, oh, look at that. That's 2013 all over again. Because we saw that here. The Pirelli compounds back in 2013, they used to have a very big drop-off. Now, all of a sudden, everything's going fine. Snap, the next lap, the tires are completely gone. Was it the same issue this time out in Silverstone? Because from the looks of things, there were blisters early on as well. But there seemed to be something slightly different that the problem was this time.
Frankly, I'm waiting for an official Pirelli statement, which I'm sure they'll make, after they investigate what the problems were. But it seemed a little too obvious that it was the front left that sort of was the tire of choice on all the 3 tires that we saw blow up. We heard that Max Verstappen's front left also had, cuts, just when he pitted the, couple of laps to the end. And it just is because of the nature of the Silverstone circuit, given the load factors that come into play. And, we talk of G-forces when it comes to the drivers, but let's remember it's the tires that go through a lot of longitudinal as well as latitudinal, G-forces, and probably them being the highest at Silverstone, especially through the, high-speed sections that we all enjoy watching the drivers drive through. So, in all honesty, it was just that. But the one question I've been wanting to, ask Mario Isola at some point, I hope I get the chance to do that, is it's okay to say that, after a certain number of laps, the tire goes over the cliff. And, by saying going over the cliff, it would mean that you don't have enough grip or as much grip.
Yeah.
But it doesn't mean that it just gives away like that and it explodes and it suddenly causes, a driver to have just 3 functional wheels.
No, it was a bit of a problem. Again, we had this in the early 2010s when Pirelli came in. I think the 2010 Canadian GP was a very good standpoint for Formula One to tell Pirelli, okay, this is what we want. We want tires to work properly, but then at one fine moment, it just goes off. We all know how that went off, and Pirelli went to making more durable tires. But that's been happening, Kunal. Tires have been quite an issue for Formula One as well as Formula 2 as well. Because if we just go back to the Hungarian GP weekend, the sprint race, the Formula 2 drivers had to pit in the sprint race. Again, completely different tyres, different compounds, I agree. But that's something very bizarre that's going on. But that aside, Pirelli, of course, it's a bit of a thankless job, this one. Like, you end up making perfect tyres all along, and then a weekend like this comes up and people just tarnish your reputation. But yeah, I think a couple of mistakes here and there, we can't tolerate that, can't we?
Yeah, we can. And, I've had the privilege of having interviewed Mario Isola several times, and he's made it very clear to me that Pirelli are just delivering to the brief that Formula One and the teams have given them time and again. And like you pointed out, back in 2010, the brief said we want high degradable tires, right? And highly degradable tires. Wow, I don't know. Maybe it's just the time of the day. But now the brief is, sort of changed to they want the tires to be more durable and so on. So this was a one-off, and, I don't think we should, pull the daggers out on Pirelli already. But my mind already shifts to what's going to happen 7 days hence, because, for the second race in Silverstone, which of course is next Sunday, the tires being used are one step softer by Pirelli. So while it does that mean that teams will naturally move to a two-stopper, the question then will also still run on how reliable will the tires be even next Sunday. And, as long as it's all safe, it's fine, because, Lewis Hamilton pointed out post-race that he was lucky his tire blew up while he was, while he was on the straights. He said if it happened through one of the high-speed corners, he would have just had a massive shunt. Let alone, finishing the race first, he would have probably, been in the barriers. So all in all, I'm sure Pirelli are going to investigate and they will come back with solutions for the upcoming British Grand Prix.
Absolutely. Just ask Danny Kvyat about what happens when a tire blows out on a corner. But Pirelli, of course, doing a good job over all these years. Again, they'll come down to the bottom of what really happened. But Lewis Hamilton, what a man. You say what you want. You say what you want about the fact that he goes on to record music videos with superstars. He goes to party whenever he wants to, wears what he wants, does what he wants in the end. But on the track, you just cannot question the way the man performs. Again, we had this discussion pre-race that Lewis Hamilton will go all out at Silverstone. It's a track he admires, and we've seen time and again that he's just a master of the circuit. Got pole position, and literally in the race, I was sitting down in the mid part of the race, and I just thought, okay, what now for Valtteri? Because he's all the way back now. It seemed like they were maintaining their social distancing. And even when Valtteri's tire blew out, the one thought that came to my mind is, oh boy, that's championship done. Because when you're up against a man like Lewis Hamilton, you're not going to get any margins at all. You make one mistake. Just ask Nico Rosberg about that. Even if you have the most perfect of seasons and you have one DNF, a 1 out of points finish, this man will pounce. And so he did today.
Yeah, absolutely. And, Lewis was dominant right from the word go in qualifying. He pulled out 3/10 on, Valtteri, which is pretty big a margin, given that under, dry conditions, the two of them have been equally matched. But I also get this feeling that Valtteri is probably trying a little too hard to sort of, bridge the gap to Lewis. And then maybe that's causing Lewis some troubles, like we saw, a rare spin from Lewis in qualifying yesterday. But I think it's causing Valtteri more troubles, in the end, because we saw how in Hungary there was a bot start, and then yesterday he just couldn't better Lewis's time through, the second run in Q3 and so on. But, like you said, 30 points, massive gap, numerically as well as psychologically. And this just means that the only way for Valtteri to bridge this gap is if Lewis has a DNF at some point of time in the season, right? Of course, unfortunate way of settling a world championship, but I'm sure Valtteri will take whatever comes his way, because today he was, very unlucky. It could have very well been that Lewis was the first driver who would have been impacted, and then, he would have lost the lead, and Mercedes would have pitted Valtteri for fresh tires and the likes. Of course, could have, would have, should have, and so on. But, it just goes to show, all in all, that Lewis Hamilton has very good champion's luck, right? And to keep doing what he's doing, he's also being aided by some, world champions' luck, unbeatable luck, I would say.
Well, they say the people who are successful, they make their own luck in the end. And say what you want about what happened in the straights. Hamilton was in the right position at the right time. It all played out into his hands in the end. Again, this just reminds me of a situation of Nigel Mansell and Riccardo Patrese. Because Nigel Mansell in 1992, dominant, supreme with that Williams. But because you've got such a dominant teammate, you never really realize how good a Riccardo Patrese is. So you never really realize how good a Valtteri Bottas is. Again, Lewis Hamilton is a once-in-a-generation talent, perhaps even more than that. Being 3/10 close to him, or let's say in Hungary in qualifying, only 1/10 behind him, Bottas is good. But that's Hamilton. That's on a different vertical altogether. But let's come back to another generational talent, Verstappen. Now, a lot of people on the internet have had this sort of debate all the way through, be it on Twitter, be it on your WhatsApp groups, be it Facebook, everywhere. Should Red Bull have actually pitted Verstappen? No. Kunal, what's your take on this one?
Red Bull have gone out of their way to publicly explain why they pitted Max Verstappen, a couple of laps to the end. Frankly, I would go with the team statement, which is that they saw blisters on his tires and they thought it would be best to pit, Max for safety as well as to safeguard, the third position, as well as then, of course, try for the extra point for the fastest lap of the race. So, one side of Red Bull would say, yes, we did the right thing. And, we were a little cautious, especially after seeing what happened to, 3 other drivers running in the top 5. So, it seems fair that they did that, but at some point, deep down inside, somewhere, 1%, they must be just like, oh my God, what if we would have just waited to see what would have happened? Because they of course preempted this. And, like Bottas said that, and Lewis Hamilton, that everything was fine. And suddenly there was an issue with their left front. So in all, it's what's done is done, despite, Mercedes hitting their worst luck in 2020. They still managed to win a race and not give up a race win to Red Bull Racing. And, something very simple but very interesting. Out of all the 20 drivers, Lewis Hamilton is the only driver to have scored points in all 4 races this season.
Absolutely. And he's the first person since Lightning McQueen to win a race on 3 wheels. Fun factor aside, but actually in terms of Red Bull, it's an interesting point, you see, because I saw Lucas Di Grassi writing a tweet. Lucas Di Grassi, of course, Formula E champion, was racing in F1, but people often forget how good drivers are because of their performances in F1. But Di Grassi, very well-respected figure in motorsport, he said, it's sad to see people going defensive and giving up before the race ends. But I kind of disagree, to be honest, because Formula One, such a high margin sport, there's such a low margin sport, I beg your pardon. You never know what's going to happen. And even if you have the chance, as you rightly mentioned, it's a three-dimensional thing. You can save your tires, you can go for the fastest lap and shield yourself for P3. I'm afraid I don't think I would do something else apart from that as well, because Lewis's tire broke off after Verstappen came in. So from the heat of the moment, you can't blame Red Bull for that, because they made the right decision based on the data they had at that point of time. Call it giving up, call it whatever you want. I think that's the most pragmatic decision. And when you've got millions and millions of dollars involved for every single Formula One point, I think Red Bull made the right choice that they could with the data in hand. So there's not much that you can say to them. But again, it's always that bit of what could have been. And that always happens in life, be it with racing, be it with your cooking as well, for that matter. Oh.
But, I have a belief that I go by, and it works in life, not just in motorsport, but I'll give it a motorsport twist. It's like retrospect can always win you a world championship. Okay.
Very true.
And like you said, given the data they had, given the decisions that they had to make, Red Bull decided to pit. That's it. That's what happened. And that's what brought Max Verstappen, clean home in second place. And it's time to stop questioning that decision, because there's no way we can undo it,
Yeah, exactly. That's quite a major factor for Red Bull, but they've got P2, which is quite a decent place to be in the end. Torrid weekend for Alex Albon, though. We've had a chat about what the championship implications could be for Bottas. I think it's about time we move down towards Formula 1.5. That's a term we're using here on Pits To Podium quite often. A bit of a bad one for him in the end, because Alex Albon, it's all coming down on him, isn't he? He's literally become our scapegoat on Pits To Podium. And I don't like to do this because Alex Albon is one driver that I love personally. I just wrote an article the other week as well, speaking about why I feel it's different to Gasly. It's purely down to his intent. come what may, whatever position he is in, you can see that sort of intent that you didn't see in Pierre Gasly. And that's what keeps me binded onto him. But again, not working out for Alex. Qualifying, disastrous. Race, just as disastrous in the end. So where's it going for Alex? And whose fault do you think it was in the end? Was it Magnussen going a bit too loose, or was it Albon being a bit too ambitious?
Honestly, I wouldn't put a blame on either driver. Okay, I just know for a fact that I wasn't in favor of the penalty that came Albon's way, because Kevin Magnussen made a mistake in the corner before, and any driver worth his or her salt would have sensed a chance to go in. And then given the place Alex was in, when he saw Kevin sort of close the door, there was nothing he could have done out there. So the question that we are then asking is, should we penalize Alex for putting half a foot inside a door that had a few inches open? I think that's a little unfair. Maybe we are just going into what we've now been calling consequence based penalties in Formula One. Like, maybe if Kevin Magnussen would have just had a bit of a twitch and not spun and gone out of the race, maybe they wouldn't have penalized Alex Albon. But again, it's a decision that's done. We've seen that the FIA stewards have an extremely challenging job to keep getting these decisions right and keep getting them fair, I would say, right? But I'm going to go back to the original question you asked, which is about Alex Albon and what's actually happening with him. And of course, it is the pressure of needing to perform as close to Max Verstappen as possible. It is known that there is always this axe that could fall on the second driver at Red Bull. So he's only adding to Red Bull's second driver problem. But he did have some technical issues. He lost out on time in the free practice sessions as well. So in all we can do is just get back behind Albon. Support him in trying to get as close to Max Verstappen as possible, because he's a phenomenal talent, young driver. It would be unfortunate to see him, drop out of Formula One at some point if that were to happen. And, like you said about Valtteri Bottas, just getting a tenth away from Lewis Hamilton itself is commendable. And, if Albon is able to do that, I'm sure it's commendable for him as well, just given how bloody good Max Verstappen is. Literally every single day he gets into a car.
Yeah, but again, racing driver philosophy though, you can't agree to the fact that the other driver is better. Classic racing driver. They'll come up with an excuse or whatever it may be. But it's the basic rule. You can't agree, at least in public, that the other driver is better than you. But I've got a question for you, Kunal. We can actually, before we go down to speaking more about the midfield, let's actually go down deeper. It's just for a bit about this Red Bull thing. Do you think Red Bull is too aligned towards Verstappen? Now, again, resources being shared, I have no doubt. It's not like the whole Weber-Vettel scenario, and they completely aligned towards Vettel. But just the atmosphere, just the presence of a maverick like Max Verstappen, or let's say, if it's Ferrari, say someone like a Fernando Alonso back in the day, or Michael Schumacher. When you have an ace in the team, even though there may not be any objective bias towards them, you think the team just leans towards the other driver, and that psychological effect has an impact on the second one? Say, be it on your Massa or Rubens Barrichello or Pierre Gasly, or sadly now on Alex Albon.
I'm pretty positive it is the case, because Red Bull is, of course, run by humans, and we are all fairly subjective about our likes and dislikes and preferences and biases. So, it would be only human to say that it happens, because, each time they look at, okay, who can match Lewis Hamilton? And at this moment, the only driver who can do that in our team is Max Verstappen. Okay, let's give him whatever it takes so that he's able to go charge at Lewis Hamilton. So that sort of happens. And then, the opposite effect is, of course, then felt on the driver who, feels a little left out, who's not given all that, and I wouldn't say not given all that attention and encouragement and likes. I'm sure there is a whole structure that looks after Alex as well. But psychologically, you do end up feeling like the sort of ignored child in the family. Okay. And that's what eventually happens. And it's not just for Albon. I mean, I'm going to go back to, even, for example, Valtteri Bottas, And since I'm on Valtteri Bottas, just two things that I found extremely surprising about Bottas today, which is probably down to his personality, is, when he made a better start than Lewis Hamilton, but he still lifted off far more than, he should have, through the turn one. He should have held more against Lewis. Lewis probably knew that Valtteri's too gentlemanly to, you know, sort of muscle more space out of him, like probably say Nico Rosberg used to do. And then, at the two safety car restarts, usually we are used to seeing drivers bunch trying to attack each other and so on. But Bottas was happy to stay back and be like, okay, Lewis can be a couple of car lengths ahead, and, sort of just let him run through with the race. So again, just talking of different ways of how, these psychologies also affect drivers when they end up racing.
Yeah. Actually, we're going slightly off topic, but I think it's quite a fun thing to discuss. How do you do it then? Because when the pendulum is swinging away from your favor, and that's one thing that Ross Brown spoke about quite a bit in depth in his book called Total Competition, superb one in the end. How do you ensure, and he said that's a crucial thing, you have to make sure that your second driver, or at least that's what they call the second driver, because apparently Ross Brown says we have no second driver until the second part of the championship, but we know how that goes about. He said a crucial aspect of that is to make sure that everyone is committed and on the same page. Now, we're all human beings. We all understand. We can all see, if you're Alex Albon, you can see that this is Max Verstappen's team. If you're Felipe Massa, you can see this is Fernando Alonso's team. If you're a Rubens Barrichello, you can see this is Michael Schumacher's team. How do you stay committed onto a project like that? And as a manager, how do you manage that? Because is it more of a disruptive force than a positive one? Because we know the positive effects of having a Michael Schumacher or a Max Verstappen in the car, but there are quite a few negative ones as well.
I mean, these are all human emotions that you're talking about. For a number two driver, the only way to try and prove some bit of supremacy is be as close to the number one driver to show the team I am as capable, and then rely on that one odd spike in performance where you suddenly pull out a surprise pole, where you sort of forcing the team to sit back and take notice at your pace advantage that you can pull out at times. And I think the third, of course, important thing is consistency. One of the things we've seen is Lewis on his worst day will still finish third, right?
Absolutely.
And that's something that all second drivers also probably need to think of, that okay, on my worst day, how many points do I lose less than, say, the number one driver, right? So it's a mix of all these things, but eventually, like I said, it's humans running the teams, humans running the sport, and we'll always sort of let our biases get into the way. But we've seen what Ferrari did. After a point in 1999, they decided, even though Michael's the number one driver, Eddie Irvine has the chance of winning the world title. So we will put all the might behind Eddie as we can, So different times that, you end up backing the different horses. But I think primarily it'll always be the alpha horses that, all teams will end up, putting their money on.
Absolutely. Right. That's all the number one, number two driver stuff done. That's all the heavy stuff done. Let's get back to something lighter. Let's get back to something that we can all make a joke of and laugh about. Ferrari. Again, disastrous weekend. Thankfully, Leclerc gets a podium, but Sebastian Vettel, Kunal. This is the start of our gateway towards the midfield. We can quickly speak about this for 5 or 7 odd minutes that we've got left, but yet another tough one. We saw last year, Vettel punted Leclerc. Let's not get down to whose fault that was in the end, but just that challenge of a weekend for him. If I'm not mistaken, Vettel was in P10, right? If
That's correct. Yes.
I guess he was. Yeah.
He was P10. He was P11. Had Bottas and Carlos Sainz finished in the points, he would have finished outside of the points. In all probability. So an unfortunate weekend for Vettel. Maybe he's of course not feeling as emotional about his drive at Ferrari anymore. Maybe Ferrari are also sort of putting all their energies behind getting Charles to get where he's getting, because despite all the inefficiencies of their design, which they have, publicly acknowledged, look at Charles Leclerc. It's his second podium in what has already been announced as Ferrari's worst year that one can remember. Right. And, we talk of having this ability to score more points than the car or the package is able to deserve. And, we've had, for example, the minute we think of we asked people to think of a driver who's delivered more than a package could have probably, make him deliver. we think of someone like, say, a Fernando Alonso, but Charles has been doing that as well. He's been up there. He's trying different things. He scored 2 podiums in the first 4 races, something that Ferrari would have probably never imagined being like the 4th or the 5th fastest team.
Absolutely.
So, in all, not as bad, given that, they got a podium. But let's remember, they still finished about 20 seconds behind Lewis Hamilton, who finished with, as we now know, 3 wheels on his wagon.
Oh, how the mighty have fallen. That's something so sad to see Ferrari be in. But speaking of fast teams, Kunal, I think this is one topic that you will not like so much today, because your whole team, Racing Point, which was Force India back in the day when you used to work there, I think the only way it is put it, although it may be free of any euphemism of any sorts, torrid weekend for them. Firstly, not having Sergio Perez, that's a huge blow. Somehow getting Nico Hulkenberg in, that must be a very costly thing to fly someone down, and getting all of the formalities done, and then realizing that he can't race because the engine didn't start. Okay, fair enough. You have your hopes pinned down on Lance Stroll, nice and quick Canadian driver on the race day, but he wasn't quick today as well. I think had it not been for the dramas on the final couple of laps, Lance Stroll would have been even further back. And on the other side, you come to think of it, that Renault, their primary competitors are the people who are irritated with them the most. Finished 4th. Daniel Ricciardo coming home with P4. Fantastic result from him. So what just happened? What happened with Racing Point today? Because this is a home circuit. You normally expect them to be super fast. And if I had a bit of humor in there, last year Mercedes was super quick over here. So there's no reason why they shouldn't be quick here too.
If I may add a bit of humor as well, I think Lance Stroll was pressing his drinks button instead of pressing the energy button, which is why his engineer was telling him, just press the drinks, just press the energy button. You have lots of energy you can use. But, on a more serious note, I'm sure they're kicking themselves. We said this in the pre-race video as well. They would have hoped for a podium by now. Again, today showed that a podium would have been possible, if they were up there just the way the second fastest team, would have or should have been there. But, probably missing Sergio Perez. Yes, unfortunate that he tested positive for COVID-19, and they did really well to get Nico Hulkenberg in. But even worse that they couldn't just even get his car started, But also, I think we saw one of those races where Lance Stroll was just a little off color. And, come to think of it, despite all the stresses around their design philosophy, they are behind Ferrari and behind McLaren in the Constructors' Championship. So all in all, not a great weekend. And they still are, they're still to score the number of points that one would have thought they would score given the advantage of their package.
That's actually quite a good point, We've always banked our expectations based on qualifying, because that's when you develop all your expectations, right? At the end of Saturday, when you look at the qualifying order and you say, oh, look, that guy, George Russell, P12, he's going to be the man who's going to get a good result. Often doesn't happen. We've seen Racing Point get some big bumper qualifying results, but not so much in the race. But let's actually move on to Renault, because these are the guys who have just filled up the vacuum of Racing Point this weekend. Fantastic P4 from Daniel Ricciardo that we mentioned just a couple of minutes ago. And Esteban Ocon getting his elbows out today and finishing at P6. So the French team are having quite a good day. And again, as usual, they fulfilled the formality. They have filed a protest as well.
I think it was fantastic to see the yellow taxis do well. Esteban Ocon probably took 45
taxis.
Ocon took 45 laps to overtake Lance Stroll, but I'm glad he, overtook Lance when he did. Daniel Ricciardo, of course, moving, I think, 3 positions in the last 4 laps. He overtook Lando Norris and then benefited from the retirements of Bottas and Carlos Sainz Jr. and the like. So all in all, great for them to pick up a good chunk of points. They're still pretty low in the Constructors' Championship, but hopefully this result will sort of give them a boost. As well as, now I think it's Wednesday before the next race when the protest verdict is expected. So let's see what happens on that front as well. But all in all, I think a good weekend for Renault, a fantastic weekend for McLaren as well. Home race for them. Carlos Sainz driving a phenomenal race. He should have been P4, but they were of course unfortunate to have had the left front tire issue like Valtteri and Lewis as well.
It's fantastic. Carlos Sainz just almost always is there. I mean, he's not had the superstar performances like Lando Norris has had this year, but he's not really put many foot wrong. I mean, I mean, if he's off color, as you mentioned, Kunal, when a world champion is off color, you often see them in P3, P4. When Carlos Sainz is off color, he's often in what, P8, P9, which for the midfield is quite a good place for him to be in.
True.
So it's only strange to consider that he's going to an even slower team next year, but that all aside later on. But quite a good point coming in. We're just about to wrap up our video, and we have a few really good star performers for today. Special props to Pierre Gasly.
Absolutely.
Fantastic drive. He's been running short of confidence. We can see ever since he's got demoted out of Red Bull. That podium place in Brazil was a confidence restorer, but this year it's been a bit of a dicey one for AlphaTauri. But that result for him, P7, will certainly get the team going back.
Absolutely. I think he's, sort of making a case for considering Red Bull to promote him one more time, if the whole Albon situation continues. But, we said this before, and I'm going to say it again, Red Bull Racing do have a driver problem. They need... Yeah. They're looking for 3 good drivers. Well, at the moment, they've got the best driver in Formula One, but they still need, 3 other good drivers. And, their junior drivers are still sort of shaping up to make it to Formula One. So let's see, if there is a mid-season driver change. But 2 more points in my notes that I've made. So, by now, Mercedes, just 4 races in, are almost twice the number of points as Red Bull Racing in the Constructors' Championship. So, Mercedes have, I think, 146, and Red Bull are at 78 points, which, in just 4 races this season, right? And I remember, for my TV show, we were just pulling out some bites of Lewis and Valtteri this weekend, and, journalists were having fun with them, asking them what are the weaknesses on the W11, and then both drivers just looked at each other, they smiled, they laughed, they smiled, and they said, we don't really see weaknesses, but definitely it can get better. And there was laughter in the room and on the Zoom call that we had. So all in all, it's just proving the fact that can Mercedes win all races this season, and it seems really likely.
Who knows? Well, they could just go one up on the old McLaren teams of the past, and even Ferrari. And I mean, that's one question for later. That's one question that we can actually have a whole 1-hour podcast on. That are Mercedes actually, factually at least, the best team that we've seen in Formula One? Again, that's a topic for later on. But well, Kunal, what do you have to say to round this thing off in the end? We've had quite a few discussion points. What's your final verdict on this race, and what do you think we can expect from the 70th anniversary Grand Prix that we have?
70th anniversary Grand Prix. It's hopefully as exciting as we've had, with softer compound tires. Maybe there's more in store for us. Who knows? It's being assumed that a 2-stopper is going to be the minimum requirement, but maybe we need a 3-stopper, and, why not? But all's not over yet, despite Mercedes' dominance, because, for example, even in the Drivers' Championships, from 6th to 9th place, you got Albon, Perez, Stroll, and Ricciardo, and they're just separated by 6 points. So there is a lot to play for, and, I'm sure we'll keep finding all these stories to keep sharing with our audiences, Soumil.
Absolutely. There's a lot to speak about in the end. Again, just before we wrap this up, just make sure that you tune in for a Formula E coverage as well, because the season is starting on Wednesday. So we're having lots of that coming up on Pits To Podium too, along with a few previews for the 78th anniversary Grand Prix. And of course, the working in F1 category that we have as well. Once again, Kunal, always a pleasure to do these post-race debriefs with you. And for all you watching and all you listening, if you like this, please feel free to leave a like, subscribe to the channel, share this video with all your fellow Formula One enthusiasts. I know they're watching. I know they want to have a bit of the British GP as well. And yeah, don't forget to join us for the next ones as well.
Thanks, Soumil.
Cool. See you then, folks. See you for the 70th anniversary Grand Prix, and hopefully you have a very good time and enjoy and cruise as much as Mercedes did throughout this race. Have a good one. Bye-bye.